40 Black and Dad podcast. We're talking parenting styles. What kind of parent are you? What kind of parent do you want to be? And milestones of the week. I'm Aaron Covington,
And I'm Tony Rag,
and this is
40 Black and Dad.
Tony. What's up, man? Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. How are you doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good. This week, just want to jump right in because
Yeah.
we've had an interesting week. We're into a kind of guttural yelling phase.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very metal. It's very metal. Like heavy metal. That she'll just be playing and scream, and it has that like guttural, like from the back of the throat kind of sound to it. And then she'll look at us and just be smiling. So it's like she's exploring sounds in a very specific way right now. And we're like, don't want to tell her no in a sense of like that it's bad, but it sounds bad to the human ear. It's a painful sound.
It sounds worse than it is, huh?
It literally sounds worse. You know what I mean? Like the sound is just imagine a heavy metal band, like the lead singer just following you and going, yeah, you know, and their most
That's funny.
like intense yell that they can do, and then just laughing about it, like, wasn't that cool? And you're like, good job, buddy. That was real cool. Yeah, just don't do it again.
That's funny. Yeah, you're definitely in that stage where you're going to be having a lot of different new things that they're playing with and they're learning voices, tactile. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun time and you're gonna learn a lot and they're gonna learn a lot too. So
Yeah. So what's going on with you guys this week?
yeah, so Legend had went to a birthday party for the first time for a another friend who turned 3. So he's a few months older than Legend, and it was cool. It's a boy, so he's they're learning like rough play or not learning, but they're into the rough play now. So
Oh
like
wait, so that's great. So this is a friend who lives relatively close,
yeah, we went to the park right around the corner. So
and
it
it's
was
about the same age,
yeah. So his birthday just passed, and Legend's birthday's in about 2 months. So
just
about
a
yeah,
couple months.
yeah,
So that's great for like development, like where they're
yeah.
developing alongside each other in a way.
Yeah, exactly. So it was cool, but it's funny because you see like how like kids play, especially as they get older, and like it was very much kind of the rough housing, like they were chasing after the ball and like running and pushing each other, and my wife was like, "Oh my God, it's so like it's so rough and
Oh,
tumble," and I'm like, "That's just sometimes how
okay,
boys
that's
play."
interesting. Like,
Yeah.
how were the moms? How were the moms overall? Like, were all the moms kind of pins and needles watching this?
Um. I can't speak to everyone, but I know the mom of the boy whose party it was like they know that their son can be rough sometimes, and we know Legend can be rough sometimes. So I think that's probably why they matched so well together. Some of the other
Uh-huh.
kids were actually a little bit older, and our kids were kind of like pushing and shoving with them too. So it was just kind of funny to see how, because it was like all boys really. So it was a group of boys between the ages of 2 and like 5, and they had like hockey
Okay.
sticks. They were playing hockey and baseball, and it
How
was
did the
pretty fun to
older
see.
how did the older boys react then? Did they
They were
kind of
just normal.
understand they were older, or that were they like roughhousing back? Or
They were pushing back. Like, I mean,
hmm.
it was very funny because yeah, they pushed back. They were playing hockey at one point and they were like checking each other, like body checks, and it was just like, oh, this is how we play. And I'm like, that's pretty normal. And my wife was a little bit taken aback, at one point. I'm like, yeah, I mean that's kind of normal how they play. I know when I was growing up, like me and my friends, we wrestled and punched and scratched and all that kind of stuff. So it was very much a normal type of
I,
uh
I do wonder about that because
milestone.
because I was always a bigger kid, and at some point, and I don't know exactly when, definitely not at 3 years old. I don't have a memory
Yeah.
that good, but I became aware of how much bigger I was than like my friends, and we did not do a lot of wrestling and roughhousing from like maybe my memory. I could go back to maybe first or second grade on.
Mhm.
I was just too big, and I didn't have any big friends.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting if that. So that's why I was asking if there was any acknowledgement from the kids if they could understand that, oh, I'm bigger than you, I'm older than you, and if that played any part in it. But maybe they're just too young to really have that
Yeah.
awareness.
I think they're still in that age of like they're still getting like they don't really understand necessarily that they're playing rough or like that's just what they do. Like, oh, they say a ball, they all dove for the ball and
For
they
sure.
ran over like rolled over each other and they got up. You know, they might have pushed each other, got sticks in their hair and they just kept moving. So at
But
this point, I think it's still new, but as they get older, we have to teach them like you can't hit. You have to be like
yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah,
different
yeah,
time and
yeah.
place for that type of stuff, and it's
We're
still
worried
just
about that.
beginning.
We're worried about that when it comes. But he had a
Exactly.
good time.
Oh, he had a great time. He loved it. He was playing with bubbles. We played spike ball. We played basketball. I mean, there was everything there, and he got to eat pizza, so it was nice.
Well, let's look at these. We talked about parenting styles a little bit, and oh, you said pizza, pizza, and what else?
Oh, pizza, just pizza and cake.
Ice cream.
No ice cream. It was outdoors, so it would have melted.
Man, what kind of parents?
But
Boo! No
the,
ice
the the
cream.
the cupcakes and cake were good, so no
Okay.
complaints.
Okay, no milk though. It's too hot for milk outside.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you got to wash it down with some ice, cold water.
Water. Yep. We had some like the energy, not energy drinks, but like the Gatorade type drinks, Body Armor, sponsored
Uh-huh.
by Body Armor. But we had some, yeah, it's good electrolyte drinks to wash it all down.
The same sugar content as
Pretty
a
much, yeah.
soda. Yeah. Well, so they got high, get high
Well,
for sure.
mostly the
They had
adults
the
are drinking.
adrenaline.
Mostly the
They had the
adults,
adrenaline
are
high
drinking,
and then the Powerade high.
and then the sugar high just from the sweet. So it was.
Yeah, and then the sugar high.
I
Two
will say
sugar highs.
he slept really well last night. Like he got home, like we got home at like 7-ish or so, and he was in bed like by 8:30 and he was out. So he slept really good.
You cannot beat that.
Not at all. Definitely,
Uh,
definitely happy for that.
in terms of parenting styles, we talked about it before, and we actually had a couple articles. And we'll talk about our parenting styles, but just in broad strokes, a number of articles mention like four distinct parenting styles.
Mhm.
And when I read them, I'm like, oh, I feel like these are more personality types more than a style, because it talks about authoritarian, which is my way or the highway, basically.
Mhm.
Authoritative, which is that's the one they say that's a good parenting style where you set some boundaries, but also you let them explore a little bit and you kind of talk out why you have these rules. You're very like open and communicative. Then there's neglectful or uninvolved parenting, and that's just like
A bit.
you're just a jerk. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you didn't want kids, or you're so scared of your influence on the kid or that you might hurt the kid that you just don't do anything and you kind of let them run, run things in a way.
Mhm.
And then permissive, which is similar to neglectful, but permissive is you're involved, but you're really just reactive. Like, what do they want? What are they doing? And you don't set
Yeah,
any boundaries.
yeah,
So those main four things, it's like, well, trying to be authoritative, trying to set some rules, but also not crush a child's young spirit. Like I was saying before about the screaming, I don't want her to think she can't scream or that's bad. Or even at almost 5 months old, if we're not even a place where good and bad are things yet, right?
Mhm.
Like even if we said no or gave consequences to this, it wouldn't really have an effect yet. She doesn't understand that level of complexity. Regardless, we don't want there to be a negative association with her vocalizing.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
like, okay, we just have to kind of grin and bear it, or if it's nighttime, we're like try to build on our nighttime ritual to like it's time to go to sleep, not time to scream,
Hmm.
without discouraging the activity, you know.
Yeah, and it's crazy because talking about all those articles we read and those four different styles, and if you look at it, like before probably our generation, most of the parenting was probably the authoritarian, where it's
Right.
like do as I say, not as I do. And I'm sure everybody, of a certain age, over 40, remembers their parents at one point saying something similar to that in most cases. And I think it was
Is
just
that something
the
you
way.
heard? growing up?
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. I mean, again, by no means was it a bad, was my childhood bad or my parents super strict, but you heard that sometimes, like, oh, do I say not necessarily as I do, or like it's because I said so was a really big one, when it came to kind of the why questions or the kind of learning, like what's the reason behind why you're saying this,
But
and
did you feel like that
that
was like
comes
the
from.
tenor in the house in the sense of that your parents were really strict, or that was just more
I
but
probably when we were younger, probably. I think there was more of just listen to what we're saying, and then there's not really a lot of room for questioning
right.
the reason why, and that definitely comes from the previous generation before my parents. They're very much military, military kids. Like most people's parents or father was probably in the military or military adjacent, in the baby boomers era before that. So I'm
Yeah,
sure that's what it was. Some of these newer styles have come from just people trying to do the exact opposite. We talked before about like
that
you
is
either
so
want to do
true.
exactly like your parents did, or you want to do the exact opposite. So you have different kind of subcultures or um, sub areas for styles of parenting when it comes to like authoritative and permissive. I think permissive is the one that's like, okay, well, we'll just kind of let you do what you want. Just make sure you're not hurt. Like, you can kind of make the rules, and
It's
we'll make sure there's nothing too bad, but it's kind of let the child led. And I mentioned before, I mentioned you earlier, kind of off the air, but I watched a show called Parent Test, and they literally trying to figure out what is the best type of parenting, and they had different subtopics. They had like intensive parenting, high achievement parenting, disciplined parenting, free range parenting, natural parenting, helicopter parents, child led, routine, the negotiation side, and then like traditional and strict and new age. So they had more subgroups, but they still kind of fit under those four categories of
right.
the four, and then there was different ones. So I think parenting is very much kind of splintered into different areas. Okay, what does the parent feel comfortable doing and not doing? And how do you relay that to your child in a way that is
R-
both
right,
like
because
ready, but also, giving them the opportunity to have some feedback into it.
right, because parenting styles is already it's kind of a confusing thing to me because
Mhm.
what 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 does it mean? What does it really mean, your parenting style? And how do you divorce that from your own personality?
Mhm.
These things are intertwined. And if you're a really disciplined person, you'll probably be a more disciplined parent. Or maybe, your discipline will keep you from some interaction with your kid at times. I don't know how it works, what the one-to-one is, but chances are who you are is part of your parenting style. And it does seem like parents need to, if you're gonna have parenting styles and like a TV show and articles about them, the more we're aware of the different styles, the more we can be flexible within the different styles as the situation calls for, right?
100%. And it also changes over time. I think it's like in the beginning, I think naturally you're going to be more
Well, that's a
authoritarian because
great point. Has yours
that kid doesn't know any
changed?
better.
Has yours
Yeah.
changed in these 3 years?
It,
Do you feel like
Yeah,
there's a
I mean, I think it's changed because also like in the beginning when the kid is not talking or doing anything, like you just like don't do that, and they're not like why, like you're just saying don't do that, and you don't you expect them not to do it, and then at age two, and they be like why, so there's the opportunity you can either be like because I said so or explain why, and I think there when they start to actually understand when you're telling them no on something, and their response is why, that's kind of where the paths start to deviate because you can be like, because I said so, or you can be like, well, because you're gonna hurt yourself, and here's why. And I think that's where a lot of the deviation starts to land is when they can actually understand. So I think everybody starts off kind of with an authoritarian type of rule because I mean you tell a
so
1-year-old
so
stop that, they're not going to say
well,
anything. They're just going to stop it. And you expect them to stop.
but I feel like even then there's such a similarity, and I wonder if that's a style change or just an adjustment to their increased capacity, their increased complexity, right? I do think those are kind of different things. I think your
Yeah.
style can be the same, even though you're explaining more later. So I guess what I'm wondering is, if like, do you feel like there's actually a difference in your approach to things that you can feel, right? Something like, if he does something that's getting on your nerves, is your internal reaction like, and not necessarily what you say or do to him, but that feeling internally, is that the same as it was a year and a half ago?
I think so. Like I feel like for me, I've always been I want to explain to you why you should not do things. Like it's hot, don't do that. You might have to touch hot at one point to understand it, and that's the only way you can learn. So I feel like for me, it's a lot of it's trial and error. You have to learn through experiences, and I think that's one way that kids can learn and understand better than just be saying, "Don't do it because I said so." Because they find in studies is if that very authoritarian rule is had, the second they're outside of that, they might not know better. They might not have structure to be like understand like the boundaries of the world. Like they might
So,
not
so
understand
what
how
would you
they might
call what would you
understand these
call this
things.
style of like explaining it? You know,
I would probably say it's more based on the four distinct ones. I'd probably say it's more authoritarian or
well,
authoritative.
if you had to give it your own name, I think is more
Oh,
interesting, because I don't really like the names that they give
I
these
didn't like it
parenting
either. I'm not
styles.
gonna lie. I don't like, yeah.
Even even the subtopics like helicopter parenting, everything kind of has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
Attachment parenting, tiger parenting. You said some other ones. They
Yeah.
kind of all have
Traditional,
negative
strict.
connotations. So it's
Yeah.
like, and even the way you explain this can be different. And even
Yeah.
the way you let them figure it out. I think those are even different, where it's like, what's it called? It's almost like exploratory parenting. If you let them explore and kind of find out for themselves. And
Hmm.
then there's kind of like a teaching parenting, where
Yeah.
you're like, but then there's also a pre-teaching where you're like, okay, we're in the kitchen, I'm showing you these things, and I do that repeatedly so that you learn. But then there's also a reactionary teaching, which is like, I'm in the kitchen doing things, and as you touch things, as you show an interest to things, I'm explaining to you what they are. As you get close to the fire, then I'm like, no, rather than
Mhm.
turning the fire on, bringing you, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of close to it so you can see that it's dangerous. Like, I even feel like those are two different
That's true.
styles, right?
Yeah, and I feel like I'd definitely be more of the teaching style, and it's some things are preemptive, other things are reactionary. Like for instance,
Yeah, I feel
hot.
like you have that energy that like, let me let me explain this to you. Let me get down and like help
Yeah.
you understand it. I feel like I'm more of like a work it out parent. Like, I'm gonna
Right,
be right
yeah.
here. I'm gonna be right here. My hand got big hands, I'll catch you. But what are you gonna do? And
Right.
she's gonna look at me like, what should I do? And I'm gonna be like, I don't know. What are you gonna do?
What you feeling in your heart right now? Are you
What's
feeling
in your heart?
froggy? You feeling froggy?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean like the biggest one that people talk about, the heat or hot fire. Like he got close to the heat, he felt that was warm. I was like, yeah, get back, that's hot. Like, don't touch that. And he learned that quick. Like that was a one-time thing. He got too close to the fire and he's like, oh yeah, I'm good on that one. And he knows what things are hot in the house. So there are things that are reactionary. Like I didn't like actively put him to the fire and be like, don't touch this in the future.
Right.
But like there are certain things that I think kids just naturally in environments that are safe will pick up on. And one thing that me and my wife have been talking about lately is like my son now, like 2.5, almost 3 years old. He remembers the last that me and my wife talk about when he's in the room, like not even talking to him,
Sure,
like he
sure.
pick up and he'll
Right.
remember things and he'll bring it back. Like, wait, where did you learn that from? I was like, oh, we were just talking about that. And he'll use that either to his advantage or just kind of speak about it. So it's like those are some ways he's learning as well. It's just like hearing us talk about certain situations and topics, and he can assimilate that the next time it comes up. I'm like, oh, that's pretty impressive. And I'm sure that's how a lot of they call the kids sponges. Like that's how he's soaking up a lot of the information So
Has he
it's not
has he
even
brought
us
up
directly
anything?
teaching.
Has he brought up anything that was like um just more interesting than other things that he overheard?
I mean, he's overheard us having conversations about like safety and like
He
trips and travel, and he'll like
I
and
feel like
like
he comes in the room like LeBron James is the GOAT, and you're like, this is a Michael Jordan
like we said
household.
Jordan, like
This is
but
Jordan.
and like even like upstairs we have the basketball game on, so like he's upstairs right now. I was up there and I came down here and he's like, Daddy, where are you going? I said, I'm going downstairs to do the podcast. He's like, to talk about me? I said, yeah, because I told him earlier,
Yeah,
I do a
that's
podcast at
funny.
but yeah, and then like and we were talking about basketball and sports and like so like it's very much like he's part of the conversation, like and he's learning from being part of the conversation versus us like sitting him down to teach him things, which I think is kind of cool. So I think it is kind of that natural teaching style that we're doing. But again, I mean, he's only two. It could change like when he becomes a teenager and like, yo, you can't leave this house because we said so. Like. So
I mean,
I
that
feel
that
like
doesn't fly
we're,
with
we're
teenagers.
flexible. Yeah,
That hasn't
exactly.
flown with teenagers since
Yeah.
like the 70s.
So it's like I feel like
That's when
there
they just
has
start
to be
sneaking out, you know.
flexibility to it. Yeah, there has to be a
That's when they just start.
flexibility to go ahead.
That's when they just start sneaking out, like because you said so.
No,
Okay,
yeah, I'm
well,
out. I'm taking
I
the car
said the
too.
window's open and
Exactly. You can't keep me
shimmying down
locked
the.
down.
Yeah, can't keep you locked down. Um, I do think parenting styles that's become more apparent apparent when you're as they get older. Once you go through elementary school and they really start having crises
Yeah.
and they think they know some things, and then you're like, how do you explain it? I think growing up there was a lot of like find out for yourself
Yeah.
in a way where it's like there's a lot of things I know my parents didn't tell me. Some things they didn't think to tell me, some things they didn't know. You realize later,
Hmm.
because the world had changed so much from when they grew up to the world we grew up in, and now we're that like that again. And I think a lot of millennials are like, I know I'm like, okay, my kid has to know so many things before
Hmm.
for me to feel comfortable, um, at any different age, and things from like, okay, there's tying your shoe at 4 years old or whatever. Then
Hmm.
there's like things like curse words, like what can you say, when can you say it? But then there's things like taxes, things like
Compound interest,
buying an apartment, what you need to know to really do that, and
have a good credit score.
credit scores, and there's like how to fix a flat, and then there's also how to get a flat repaired. I think those are two
Hmm.
different skills, that I have to think about how to convey those lessons. And I think the parenting style is very, very interesting. Like old TV show, I remember on the old, that old comedian show that we won't talk about, but he did an episode where he turned the house into like a little city. So he
Okay.
gave the kid some money, the oldest kid, and he had to like rent an apartment, which was renting his room. And then
Hmm.
they was like teaching a lesson on economics.
Okay.
So that's like a parenting style to like make your house like the real world. And he had to buy his own food and stuff. But another style could be let's sit down with a piece of paper and show you what a budget is like. Those are two
Yeah,
different styles.
that's very true. And just real quick, going back to what you had mentioned, like, what types of things that we have to think about now as millennial parents that our previous generation of parents, you think about mental health and self-esteem and like social media. Like these are topics that we're gonna have to navigate probably, I mean, earlier than our parents. I mean, our parents never had to worry about social media with us. Like, no, we never talked about that. But now with my son, like, we have to worry about like, okay, you have to understand like social media is not your friend. Like, you can't have your whole identity tied to social media because your self-esteem is gonna be low. Like, there's self-esteem, there's mental health, there's depression, there's anxiety. Those things are tied to the
Well,
fact that we are so much more connected. So people feel like that is a huge part of their identity now, and I think that's going to be a big thing that in the next 10 years is going to be a huge thing that parents are going to have to be like,
yeah, social
this is more important than tying your shoes. Like,
social media is so crazy because we grew up.
yeah.
I mean, we didn't have social media in high school, right? Well, I guess MySpace or Black
Yeah,
Planet.
but that was different. I mean, because when I say social media, I mean on your handheld phone. Because MySpace, you had to
No,
go
no,
home.
totally, totally. But
Yeah, like you go home, to
I'm
this
just trying to
view.
be historically accurate a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah,
before
MySpace is
somebody,
wrong. Yep. Yeah, MySpace
but
is wrong.
we didn't have it. We really saw it happen. So when, and to generations even under us, even
Yeah.
more so because we were older. So when kids were really getting bullied or harming themselves, things like this,
Mhm.
we were like in our 20s witnessing it. And this,
Yeah.
to think like the history of it, like this was the first time this kind of thing was happening. And now
Hmm.
I do think that younger kids are, that it's been passed down, that they're learning. They're not trying to be online, or they're not trying to be visible online.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things to take from that. And I'll actually be a witness to a lot of it because I have a nephew who's turning 13, I mentioned before.
Hmm.
So he's just getting at the age of where he might even have his own email account, his own phone and things. I got to check in and see where he's at with all that. But
Yeah.
so, yeah, like you said, that's another thing. And it's like, how do we talk about it? I think that's really where the style is. How do you talk about it and finding out, like, because we're such a freaking snarky generation,
Hmm.
we're so
Oh yeah.
meta and we're so like, I know you are, but what am I?
Yeah. Everybody got a
That like
sarcastic, funny response to everything, no matter
everybody is
who it hurts.
all the time. You can, even it's hard to just ask people questions. You'll be like, hello. They'll be like, hello. You're like, what time is it? You don't got no watch? I'm asking.
Right.
Can I just get? So what I'm getting at is we have the snark, but where's the sincerity? And when
Yeah.
you deal with kids, it's like you have to find a way to like break through and have sincere talks with them. And that's a whole nother
Hmm.
style. But
Yeah.
sometimes you can be jokey. Some people are just naturally more jokey. That's a style,
Hmm.
and I think generations we grew up with, like you're talking about your parents in the military, is very much not only a my way or the highway, but like an intense, whether a yelling or a lecture that was really intense.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that's definitely a style that I do not want to be doing
Yeah.
with my
I
kid.
agree.
I can be somewhat intense talking to people or explaining something, but as I've become more aware of that, I definitely tone that down and definitely don't want to be at her like, listen, when you go to the closet, I mean, like I want to be definitely more relaxed and more, just like accepting or like more chill. What else can I,
Yeah.
more chill about it?
And then one thing we haven't even talked about is like, discipline from like a spanking perspective. Like now, like, I mean, back in the 80s and 70s, like spanking was a very normal, like, thing that you saw all
What
the time. Everybody got spanked.
what was your
Now,
experience
if you
with
see,
that? If you
oh, I got
if
spanked.
you
I mean, I was a good kid, but I mean, I got some spankings. Like, got the
bro,
spoons. I had, the plastic spoons that, I've been hit with,
man, we got
because I did it. I was wrong. It was my fault. But now, like, you
wait,
can't,
what does
like,
that mean? It wasn't your fault?
I'm not trying to get my parents in trouble. I'm not trying
Oh, yeah,
to. I got
yeah,
hit
yeah,
with
yeah.
spoons all the time. Yeah, I
D
was in the
DCFS,
wrong.
your 40-year-old son on a
Exactly.
podcast.
He's
You're
snitching on
coming
you.
with us. You're coming
Exactly.
with us. Okay.
I'm going
We
to a
definitely
better
got
home
spanked.
now.
We definitely got spankings too.
Yeah.
And I was a good kid too, but it's kind of unavoidable. But we
Yeah.
didn't get like weapons. But my dad
Mm-mm.
was like almost my size. And it's like,
Mm.
bro, bro, you know? But that's like you said, that's how it was then. And
Yeah.
that's not something that's acceptable now. And
No,
really,
not
you
no more
understand
clothes.
that's definitely one of the things that you mentioned earlier, where it's like either trying to do what your parents did or the complete opposite.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, some people still are like, I got spanked. And what the funniest thing is when people are like, I got spanked, I turned out okay. I'm like, what is your therapist? Did your
Yeah,
therapist say you turned out
exactly. Like,
okay?
did you? Yeah.
Because it
Who
doesn't
told
sound like you did. That's
you
definitely a thing I'm staying as far away from like as possible.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's nowhere close to socially acceptable. Like when I was a kid, I got tapped on the hand in the grocery store, or tapped on the butt, or hit in the back of the head. Just don't touch that candy. Huh. You see, if you do that now, if I saw somebody hit their kid in the back of the head now, I'm like, oh, y'all, you about to get beat. Like, we reporting
Yeah.
you. Like, you can't do that. So it's not that. And like I said, as a society, I think we've all turned away from that. Like, okay, we're gonna keep our hands off the kids. Like,
Well,
we can do verbal abuse, but we're
we
not physical.
realize we purple. You dumb son of a.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't effing yeah, like
you really just realize like it can keep you from doing something, but it's not. We're all so damaged. mentally.
Yeah.
That's why mental health is a big thing, because most of us got whooped as kids and didn't learn how to express ourselves or just learn to repress things. And
Yep.
I'm not in therapy right now, but recently I've been in therapy. I would go back when I get the chance, most likely. And this is one of the reasons why. So,
Yeah.
each generation's trying to reduce the reasons their kids go into therapy.
Exactly. And every kid after they got spanking, it didn't hurt that much. No, good. Well, it hurt. Like it didn't even hurt that much.
Yeah.
I'm good to like a man. Like no, you need to talk this out. Let's talk about this. Get a hug.
Yeah.
Like so,
I
yeah.
mean, at a certain point, physically, it doesn't hurt that much,
Yeah, it's more of the it's more of the
but it
emotional. Like
always
it's
it
it's
always
that
hurts inside.
emotional. Like I got beat. Like okay,
It
I
always,
I can't do nothing about it. Yeah, yep,
even if you're shaking it off, that just means you're detached emotionally.
exactly. Yep,
So that's
exactly.
even maybe worse
Yeah.
than feeling bad about it.
Like the physical pain
Oh
wears off, but that
yeah,
emotional and mental pain, oh, that lasts forever.
that
That's why
never.
the whole psychology
And
market exists.
I think when you get older, the ones that don't physically hurt, I mean, you're older, so your mind is better anyway. Those are the ones you remember anyway. You're like, that whooping didn't even hurt, but why did I get a whooping for that?
I wasn't even in the wrong. I didn't even go down there in that basement with them. No.
I should have gotten
Yeah.
an apology for that.
Right, exactly. I got a list of times where I should get apologies now from my parents. Like, remember
Yeah.
that time y'all beat me? Okay, yeah, I
Uh-huh.
say sorry. Yeah,
Yeah. That punishment was not. Why was
yeah.
I
Did
even?
not fit the crime. Yeah.
That actually makes me think, and we'll talk about this next time about education. But like in school, you get a grade, and that's what you got on the tests or whatever. But you really should be able to continue taking it until you get
Hmm.
an A, because that's really how you learn, is through making mistakes and then finding out the right answer. And same with like punishment. It's like if you just punish me, then I'm not. I don't know that I'm really learning anything, no matter how much you talk to me. It's like
Hmm.
we have to have like some physical action, some like world perspective to understand.
That's true. Yeah. Again, teaching more than telling, I think that's a
Back
really
to
big
teaching.
point.
Good
Yeah,
style.
back to teaching. It is. I mean, and I think that's where a lot of parents, especially in our age, the older millennials you're seeing more teaching as opposed to more telling. And I'm curious to see again, we have no idea what's going to happen, to our kids in 20 years or how they're going to turn out, but it's going to be very curious to see how all these things with social media, mental health, lack of, the physical, beatings, for lack of a better term, and how that's going to affect the next generation, and if it's going to do better or if it's going to make them softer. Like we don't know, but we can only do kind of what we feel is right in each situation,
Yeah.
and then try to, like, again, have conversations like these
I
with other parents and see
I
like,
think
oh,
for
what
sure
thing you're seeing.
too, what tougher or softer even means. And I think as legend gets older, we'll talk about that a lot.
Hmm.
Especially him being a boy. Not that it doesn't apply to girls, but we know it has a different meaning for boys. But I
Yeah.
think we've done a lot today. It was a great talk,
Oh yeah.
kind of exploring styles and who we want to be, what we've been through, and what it means to have a different style and to think about how you want to approach problems
Yeah.
or successes, even. That's another style. How do you want to celebrate your kid and your kid's milestones? Something to think about. Parties, doing something just with you two, like you and your son to celebrate. There's a lot of different ways. We could really even come back to this topic and
Hmm.
unfold it a little more. But we are done for today.
Yeah. Like and subscribe, everybody. And then send us any topics you guys want to hear of.